Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Rosie Murphy.
And I'm Sammy Roth, and this is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
We've reached Season 6, Episode 8, Recon. This is, of course, a Sawyer flash sideways.
And it's a really great episode. I gotta say, I've forgotten how good this episode is.
Same.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the episode. We're also going to have more from our conversation with Michael Emerson, continued from last week.
Let's get started.
Let's start with our hot takes about Recon. Rosie, what do you got? What's your hot take?
I didn't want my hot take to be, this is such a great episode, oh my goodness, that will come up throughout the conversation. So instead, I think I've identified the thing that I don't like about Season 6 in an overarching way. This
better be hot.
It's really pretty hard to follow. Like, we spend whole weeks with one group, and then we spend a whole week with another group. And it's easy to lose the thread, I think, from episode to episode of what, Sawyer and Jin were up to. And when we go back next week to Jack, what's Jack been up to? It takes a minute to catch up in a way that I don't remember feeling. Not that the first 5 seasons didn't have incredibly complex plots, they did. But I don't remember feeling that lag from week to week. Whereas now it's like I really need the previously on Lost stuff because it's been a while.
Well, this week's didn't actually have a previously on Lost.
I know, which made it harder. I had to look it up myself.
Interesting. I gotta say, that's a good hot take in that I strongly disagree.
Say more.
No, I mean, I've got problems with Season 6. You know it. Everyone knows it. We've been discussing it. But I don't think it's hard to follow. I do think there's a lot going on. I mean, they're balancing a lot more, storylines and different threads than usual. Mm-hmm. I mean, they've scattered all the characters to the winds, and that can have negative effects, like Jin and Sun somehow still not being in the same place and having nothing better to do or say than, I must find Jin/Sun. That's not great. But otherwise, I think it's fun to follow all the different threads and to see how they come together. I think previously on Lost helps, and maybe they should have done it this week. But I think that is not at all one of the problems with the season.
I think that's fair. That's fair. It may also just be a result of us recording episodes every other week this week. It's been a month since we watched the last episode that featured Sawyer. But yeah, I just think I'm finding it harder to keep up than I did in previous seasons. Anyway, what's your hot take?
So yes, I'm also going to not do the just I love this episode so much hot take. One thing that jumped out at me in the really wonderful Sawyer flash sideways storyline where he's a cop, which we'll talk a lot about. The scene where the amazing scene where he's like with the woman at the beginning in bed and the money spills out and you think it's a con at first, and then there's the fabulous twist. She pulls the gun on him, and then there's the even better twist. No, it turns out he's a cop and he's, getting her. I couldn't help but wonder after watching that, is Sawyer as a cop investigating this woman and her husband allowed to have sex with her? That seems real questionable in terms of how that would hold up in court.
I don't have a real answer to that question. My only knowledge, I wouldn't even call it knowledge of the topic. My only familiarity with the topic comes from The Wire, which is probably not super reliable. But if I recall correctly, there's a prostitution sting where McNulty has to be stopped before he can have sex with anyone because that would make it inadmissible.
I don't know if anyone out there knows the answer to this. We're on Twitter at the Hatch Podcast. I didn't want to Google it. I don't know what it would do to my Google history if I tried to figure this one out. But if you're out there in or adjacent to law enforcement or have been in this situation yourself somehow, at the Hatch Podcast, come find us and share the answer. It's a great storyline, though, the Flash Sideways.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Potentially my favorite of the Sideways so far.
I think I agree with you. And I feel like it's so good because it's kind of like the Sawyer that we have always wanted to see.
Yeah.
He's becoming that person more and more in the On Island storyline. And there's great moments this week when he, which we'll talk about, where he shows how much he cares about Jin, how much he cares about Miles. But Sawyer is never not going to have that dark edge within him because of what happened to him as a child. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the version of him in the Flash Sideways, it's like, yes, this is who I wish Sawyer had become and how I wished he had been able to somehow handle that. Like the scene where he says to Charlotte, and it's such a great scene, where she gets him to own up to, well, don't tell me what you tell the other girls. Tell me why you really became a cop. And he gives the speech.
Well, I guess I got to a point in my life where I was either going to become a criminal or a cop. So I chose cop.
It's perfect. It's like, it's inspiring.
I didn't actually love that explanation because I don't know that it makes a lot of sense.
Well, let's go back. You were nodding your head with me for a minute there. So let's go back to that part, and then we can talk about what we disagree about.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that's remarkably done in this Flash Sideways is that we really see Sawyer has real bonds with other people, which is what he doesn't have when he lands on the island. I mean, twice in the Sideways, he suffers consequences for being a dick, which, he does on the island, but they're in the Sideways, they're consequences he cares about, right? So Miles dumps him as a partner, which another thing I didn't really know you could do. But he does.
Go with it.
Because Sawyer's lying to him and Miles knows. And then, after he kicks Charlotte out in the middle of the night and he, goes to apologize, she won't hear it. She tells him to leave, and that's a deserved consequence, and he feels bad about it. And that is the instinct that I think the Sawyer that we see on the island has worn away over time. Like, it's just atrophied in him over time, is the ability to care about that stuff and to feel sort of empathy and bonds of friendship and care like that. Because when we do something that hurts the people we care about, we are supposed to feel bad about it. And this version of Sawyer does. And that's just like
I love that.
A very simple but very human thing.
I love that so much. And I mean, and you're right. Not only does he feel bad, but he takes action in response.
Yeah,
I mean, with Miles at the end of this, he opens up, and it's so hard for him. I mean, he's already there. He's brought the Sawyer file to the car. He's sitting there with Miles. He's clearly made the decision to do it. Mm-hmm. And yet when it comes time to actually sort of make the confession and Miles asks, who's Sawyer? He just sits there and he's trying to form the words, like he's moving his mouth. It's like 5 or 10 seconds. It's a really long time. He can't quite bring himself to do it, but you're right. Miles is so important to him that he knows he has to get over that hump, and he does.
Yeah.
It's real powerful.
Yeah. And even in the relatively low stakes relationship with Charlotte, he cares enough to want to apologize for being a jerk. And, maybe it's because he's sort of lonely and sad, but maybe it's because he knows he was a jerk.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's both. I liked that at the end of that sequence, even after she rightfully and, totally justifiably rejected him, that he left the sunflower at the foot of her door. I thought that was really sweet.
Yeah.
Wanted, even if I think he knew it wasn't going to make any difference for him, but he wanted to, just leave one last nice thing, a positive impression, which very different than the Sawyer we've come to know and love/hate.
Yeah. And I agree that I like your assessment of this as the person Sawyer was always capable of becoming had he, made a couple of different choices along the way. Because we do see him, like you said, on the island in this episode. He's still very much looking out for number one. He accepts this mission from Locke. He gives it up to Widmore, then he double crosses Widmore. But he seems to be demonstrating that there are people, what he says to Widmore at the end is that
the people I come back with, people on my boat, don't get touched. Not even a hair on their head. And 2, you give us safe passage off the island.
He seems to be exhibiting some of that same, okay, I want to get Kate off the island. I want to get Jen and Son and Miles off the island. There are people that he cares about enough to. He's not nearly as sort of self-interested as he was when we first met him in season 1, but he's not yet this man that he's capable of being.
Agreed completely. I did like to see the progress, though. I mean, there were, I think a couple moments that stood out to me. One was when he's with Jin at the beginning, and he's, Jin is says, "We need to get out of here. Locke's coming back." And Sawyer's like, "No, I'm with him now." And Jin says, "I can't leave. He's going to get us off the island." Sawyer says, and Jin's response is, "We can't leave. Sun might be here. I can't leave." And Sawyer immediately, on a dime, changes his plan. Says, "Fine, if she's here, you got my word. We ain't leaving without her."
Yeah.
And that goes back, I think, to your point about his ability to form real relationships and care about people. He has started to do that finally on the island. This is the relationship that he had with Jin for 3 years in the Dharma Initiative, where he has his plan, he's made his decision, and he's willing to change that here because he knows this is important to Jin.
Yeah.
And then with Miles as well, I liked when when Kate and everybody showed up and Sawyer asks them, did people make it out of the temple, or is Jack okay? Is Hurley okay?
Yeah.
He specifically mentions them, and Kate says, "Yeah, I saw them leave." And then only after she answers that and doesn't mention Miles does he say, "What about Miles?" It's like, okay, Miles is who he really cared about here because that's his friend.
Yeah.
From the Dharma Initiative, but he didn't want to be upfront and acknowledge how much he cared for Miles, so he held back, and when he didn't get that answer, he's like, "But what about Miles? How's Miles doing?"
That's a great read.
I thought it was sweet.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I will say on the the double crossing, Sawyer was masterful this episode. Mm-hmm. Like, at first I had a moment when when Locke is sort of flattering him. Locke, I just call him Locke for short, is flattering him and saying, you'll be just fine when you go over there because you're the best liar I've ever met. You'll come up with a good story and you'll figure out how to stay safe. And I found myself watching that scene and thinking like, oh, come on, like, you come on, Locke, you're just flattering him. You know that you're a better liar and manipulator than he will ever be. And yet by the end of this episode, Sawyer pulls it off. He has successfully conned both Locke and Widmore.
Yeah.
And what was especially impressive about it to me, and tell me if you agree with this read or not, is that I think that until he saw that submarine that Widmore came to the island on, his plan really had to be to, work with and support Locke, at least to the extent that Locke could help him, because, he couldn't fly an airplane off the island. Right. Like, he doesn't know, I don't think he knows Frank Lapidus is there. Like, as far as he knows, he needs Locke's help to get off this island. But the moment he sees that sub, he thinks, okay, there's a device here that I can pilot, or that, we can reasonably do ourselves. And in that moment, in like the, minute or two between when he's marched into there to talk to Widmore and when he, masterfully takes over that conversation with Widmore and convinces Widmore to help him, he has to come up with this whole new plan where he's double-crossing both of them and taking the sub while they're busy fucking with each other. It just brilliant, like really brilliant work by Sawyer there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Sawyer at his best, and it really seems to be him thinking on his feet, in a way that we always we talk about this similarly with Ben Linus a lot, in a way that Ben is not always able to. Like, Sawyer is able to change his mind and commit to this new plan, and I think we actually see him do it several times. Like, I think it's possible that he saw the sub, decided to maybe help Widmore, and then like on the way back decided, actually, I can double cross Locke too. I mean, who knows? It doesn't.
That's
really
I
matter,
like that. I like that interpretation, actually.
Yeah, I read it more as like he's trying to sort of get through each moment, get through each conversation, and then the plan is building itself, as we go.
I like the Ben Linus comparison that you just made, and the idea that maybe Sawyer is better at thinking on his feet in some ways, because we had that whole conversation about Ben when he was dealing with Kimi not being able to recognize that the situation had changed and that he had to handle this one differently than he might have in the past. But the Ben Sawyer thing I was thinking about, Sawyer says to Zoe, Widmore's hench person who's introduced, she uses the expression, "thank God," and Sawyer says, "trust me, God's got nothing to do with it." That harkens so strongly back to a Ben line from season 2, when Ben and Locke are in the hatch, and Locke refers to something about God, and Ben says, "God doesn't know how long we've been here, John. He can't see this place any better than the rest of the world can," which is one of my favorite lines on the show. So I feel like that must have been a deliberate callback, and it's interesting that they chose to put that version of it in Sawyer's mouth this time.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like, Sawyer has become kind of sage and, sage and thoughtful all of a sudden.
I mean, even in season 1, he was the guy with the glasses reading on the beach.
That's true, which we're reminded of this week when he's got Watership Down and various other books on his desk in the sideways.
Yeah.
He had it in him. This is what I liked about the cop versus criminal line. Because, I do feel like, going back to your point about, that he's being the person that we always knew that he could be, that he had inside of him. In some ways, you could read it as an unsatisfying line because he doesn't really give a full explanation. The way I choose to interpret it is life can be so random. Like, who knows why you might choose one path that leads you in one direction versus another. Like, he recognizes that he has within him this ability to lie, to manipulate, to be thoughtful, to think on the spot, that he's going to be involved in kind of dangerous and, edgy situations because of how what happened to him when he was a kid. He could have become a criminal. He could have become a cop. Maybe it didn't have to be profound one way or the other. Maybe it's just, a neuron fired off in his brain differently one day than it might have in a different universe where it fired a different way and led him down a totally different path. I find that weirdly kind of satisfying to think about.
Yeah, I think that's one of the profound lessons of the Sideways, right? Is that we always have, like within us, we all have the ability to lead many different lives, and these probably are not hugely significant choices, like you're saying. Like whenever Sawyer decided to enroll in the police academy or whatever, it probably wasn't that significant a choice. It's just like, okay, this is the next thing I'm doing. Just as we see in Ben's life when his father brought him back from the island. That wasn't even Ben's choice at all. It was just like a thing that happened and a decision that was made without thought to 40 years down the road, because how can you even give thought to 40 years down the road?
Right. And if his father makes a different decision one day and decides to stay, Ben becomes this, evil, horrible version of himself rather than the, sweet and thoughtful teacher. And he's still the same person deep down, but you can do something very different with that same skill set and those same instincts.
Well, and there are an infinite number of those decisions in our lives, right? There's not just the one moment where Sawyer chose to become a cop. It's that moment plus, all sorts of stuff that goes into that. But yeah, the core is the same, like we talked about with Ben, I think.
One relationship that we haven't talked about is the Sawyer-Kate relationship.
I was going to say...
What are you thinking about that right now?
In a very short period of time in this episode, there is like a lot of Sawyer and Kate tension that harkens back to the early days. When Kate first gets to the camp, there's this little like very intimate greeting where he says like, "Hi yourself." And then he goes to the cages and he finds like the dress that Ben made Kate wear when they were trapped in the cages. And
which is sitting there from when they like had sex in the cages multiple years previously, which is a little bizarre, but okay.
Right. Yeah. And it's just like, I don't mind it. I don't mind it because there is a part of me that still ships Sawyer and Kate. Not entirely. I think Juliet is incredible, but I don't know. I think it was an interesting choice on the part of the writers. I don't know. Obviously, we can't know what they were trying to do, but the way it came off to me was, oh, this is still here. Like these are still people who care very much about each other, and it's complicated. Like a lot has happened. It's, difficult to define, but the bond of care, like we talked about with all these other relationships, is still there.
Definitely. Yeah. I also found myself wondering, like, were the writers intending to set up, like, they were going to make it a Jack versus Sawyer question with Kate again at the end, and I don't have any real recollection of them going that route the rest of the season. I don't know. I would like to think that we can interpret it as, along this theme of Sawyer forming real relationships and caring, what happens to others besides himself, that maybe this is him realizing that despite what happened with Juliet, despite everything he's been through, despite what he feels that Jack and Kate put him through, that he still does, care about her and, wants to help, get what's best for her and get her off the island. And maybe it doesn't have to be in a romantic context.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think Sawyer always did genuinely care about Kate and just sort of didn't know what to do with it. Because he had never had a genuine like emotionally, serious relationship. And there are moments, I think, throughout the Sawyer-Kate pushing and pulling that goes on for many seasons where, he almost gets there and he shows some sort of like genuine affection or selflessness, and then he retreats from it, right? And maybe after his years in the Dharma Initiative, his years with Juliet, he has learned that it's okay to care about people.
Yeah. Maybe he's also learned, just like that loss is a part of life that he needs, and people are not always going to be there. I mean, he knew that because of his parents, but his reaction to his parents getting killed was to, not care about anybody ever, and not let himself get so close to anybody that he would care if they were gone. Mm-hmm. Now he let himself get real close to Juliet, and she's gone.
Yeah.
And maybe that's made him realize that these other people that he had to admit that he cares about them too, and he wants them to still be there. He wants to help get them off the island and keep them safe, and make sure that they can continue to be a part of his life, and that includes Miles and Jin and Kate, and Jack and Hurley, etc.
Yeah, and maybe not even that they can continue to be a part of his life, but just that they're okay. Yeah.
One more note that I had on Kate that I don't know how it affects these conclusions or not, but at the end of the episode, in the last line, in the last scene where he's explaining his plan to her, he calls her Freckles.
Yeah.
And I checked. It was the first time he has called her Freckles all season. He had actually been calling her Kate before that, so whether it's romantic or not, I think that he's willing to accept that he, that's sort of his way of signaling, like, I am, you are someone I care about, and we have a closeness, and I value that.
I hope so.
I feel like there's a couple more scenes in the Flash Sideways that we probably ought to talk about. I loved that they brought Charlotte back.
I did too.
As always, I wish that they had given her more and more interesting stuff to do than, like, have sex with Sawyer, because she's a character who deserves more. She's a female Indiana Jones, as they joked about this week. Which as Lostpedia reminds me, harkens back to her description for her audition, that she was supposed to be like a female version of Indiana Jones. Like, why do we never get to see that version of Charlotte? However, still happy that she's here. She's fun.
Yeah, man. That's a spinoff I would watch, but
yeah.
Absent that, what a great callback. What a surprise callback. I knew it was coming, of course, and it's just a moment of delight. Yeah, and it's such we've already talked about this at length, but like, it's just such an interesting way of showing us the ways in which Sawyer is different. Like, he's still, getting set up on dates and wooing women in his way.
Still kind of a playboy.
Yeah, but he's not a con man anymore. He's just actually trying to meet people.
Right. And he still wants to kill Anthony Cooper, by the way.
Yes.
Like, that hasn't changed. His cop, and Miles says he wants to talk him out of it, but yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but the rest of it has.
I also love the brief appearance of Liam Pace.
Yes.
Like, just foreshadowing that Charlie's going to be showing up soon. Like, I thought that was lovely.
Yes, and Kate appears at the end of the Flash Sideways as well, because Sawyer catches her running through the alley, and
I had forgotten that was going to be Kate. I did not recall that scene and where that led. That was very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For those who haven't listened, by the way, we did have Rebecca Mader, Charlotte, on the show at the beginning of season 4 for multiple episodes. That's worth checking out. We also had Neil Hopkins, who played Liam Pace, Charlie's brother, all the way back in season 1. Also a good interview.
Yeah. I would like to talk briefly about Claire.
I thought you might say that.
Yeah. I think that the Claire and Kate relationship is actually kind of interesting in this episode after they've sort of been doing the same thing with it for a few weeks now. I don't love John Locke's explanation of, I had a crazy mother and now Aaron has a crazy mother, and therefore, Kate, I will offer you advice. Like that, that's nothing. That just seems like such an oversimplification. And, Claire, at least as I feel at the end of the series, like Claire can heal. Claire can come back from this, like she's not, I feel like Locke is talking about her like she is sort of irredeemable, like she has gone over to the darkness that they talk about with Sayid, and she hasn't.
Well, the way that Locke treats Claire is very weird.
Oh, it's uncomfortable.
It's Yeah, like, you know, he slaps her.
Just do this!
This is completely inappropriate. All right. Now, you go over there. I'll deal with you in a minute.
And he's dealing with her like she's a you know, small child who's misbehaved. Not that I would endorse slapping a small child. Nobody should do that shit. But that's kind of the vibe I'm getting.
Well, right, and like she's a child who should be seen and not heard and should take his orders. Like it's a very, yeah, it made me uncomfortable.
I don't know. I have thoughts on Locke and Claire. I mean, putting Locke aside for a second, Claire. Yeah, that's interesting to me that you found it interesting. I found myself mostly just feeling nothing watching the Claire-Kate story this week. Like, I don't know, looking at the fucking squirrel baby again, where she's the whole thing. Oh, you know, Kate, you know, is kind of judging her for that, and Claire's explanation is, I had nothing left.
It's all I had.
That's all I had left. I have trouble with that, and the way Locke treats her, and when she tries to like slit Kate's throat, I found myself not feeling very much. Like, I don't know, it's like, you know, this isn't going to go anywhere. I don't know. I'm not convinced by where Claire's at. I don't find it that compelling. Her apology to Kate and her turnabout at the end is so abrupt, and it's like, what brought this about? Like, was it Locke's stern talking to? Is she just so quote unquote crazy that she's, you know, going from trying to murder Kate to, you know, sobbing apologies to her in the same day? I don't know. It's all over the place and just doesn't do a lot for me.
Yeah, my chosen interpretation, and this is probably mostly wishful thinking and not super canon, but my chosen interpretation is like, this is the first contact Claire has had with anyone who's not the Man in Black in a long time, in years, you know? And I feel like, based on the brief interactions we get between Locke and Claire in this episode, like, I don't think he was a good caretaker. I don't think he was encouraging her to move on or not nurse this grudge or not create a squirrel baby. Like, I sort of wonder if she was, you know, one of the Man in Black in this iteration or in the Christian Shepherd iterations, like, first victims of, you know, him sort of testing his limits. How can I manipulate other people? You know, here's somebody who is more or less completely helpless, and I can use her. And I know John is not like trying to kill Kate. It's not like he's sending Claire to kill Kate, but I feel like I just wanted better for Claire, and I want to blame the Man in Black instead of the writers.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's probably accurate. Like, that seems like a reasonable interpretation. I just don't find it that interesting.
It's fair.
I don't know. It would have been nice if we'd gotten a Claire episode, right? Like,
what has she been up to for the last 3 years?
Yeah, like if they had
That's
done
a
another version of what was the episode from season 2, Maternity Leave, where we got the flashback to. It was actually very similar. It was like Claire comes back from the, you know, being in captivity with Ethan and the others, and she's like lost her short-term memory, and then we get a flashback episode to explain, here's how Claire got to this like very weird place mentally.
Boy, that's a great idea.
Why did they not do that again? You know, frankly, I suspect they wouldn't have been able to do that very well, because I don't think they thought this through very well, and it probably wouldn't have made sense. But that's what would have solved it, if they could have had a compelling episode, you know, showing you from Claire being led off into the jungle by who she thought was her father to getting to this point. That maybe they should have done that instead of across the sea. I don't know.
Well, that's so much more interesting than she's crazy, which is this very dismissive, unsatisfying explanation.
Yeah, I feel like they had to play it up with the squirrel baby and take it to, you know, a level 11, because they knew they didn't have a lot else going on for them here, and there had to be something that gave it an edge or made it compelling. And I don't think it worked, but I think that was probably what they were trying to accomplish. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like your alternative idea a lot better. I just like the idea that it's nice to see Kate with so much clarity of mission. Like, Kate came back to get Claire, and by God, she's going to get Claire. And
even if it kills her.
And that, you know, that extends to, oh, this is not like the person I thought that I was saving. I'm still going to save her. And I wish that had been that is what I think we start to see in this episode, and it's just not quite given that much room to breathe. Because I think it could be powerful.
Totally.
Yeah.
It is not, but it could be.
Yeah.
On the lock front, by the way, so we talked about how weird it was that he treated Claire. A couple other weird kind of lock moments, like not bad but weird, like when he's going off with Sawyer at the beginning and he's peeved and he says, "I wish you hadn't interrupted me." And then later in the episode, we sort of talked about it, but his interactions with Kate, like he has a kind of a weird smile when he reaches down to give her a hand to pull her up, and he gives the story about his mother, which like is technically true, but also, yeah, like you said, it's a bit of a weird way of trying to bond with Kate. Like, I'm not really sure why he thinks she's going to be convinced or sold by that. I don't know. He just, also when he made the speech to the group, he says, "I know everyone is tired. It was a long and traumatic night for all of us." I think, motherfucker, it's not a traumatic night for you. You just murdered a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. Like, and then you're, comforting these two little children and promising you're going to take care of them. It's like, no, it's like in your plan, they end up dead too. Same with Kate, by the way, that he promises to protect her when he really wants to kill her. Like, the man is demented. Like, I think he's getting joy out of this even. Like, I think he's enjoying, like, making these promises to people that he's planning to kill. Yeah. Really, really demented.
It starts to get less funny in this episode and starts to creep me out.
Agreed. Yeah. Like, there was the one scene that we haven't talked about is, he asks Sawyer, he's telling Sawyer what happened at the temple, that he killed all those people, and his explanation
I am
is
the smoke.
Right, he says, "I am the smoke," and then Sawyer asks,
You telling me you killed all those people?
I gave them the opportunity to leave peacefully, and they didn't take it.
Why not?
Because they're convinced that they're protecting the island from me, when in fact, all I want to do is leave. So it's either kill or be killed. And I don't want to be killed.
I think that's true. I mean, it's true in that it's a rational explanation of where he's coming from and how he got to the point where he's making the decisions he's making. Like, from his perspective, not only Jacob, but all of these people and forces who are aligned with Jacob, are unjustly keeping him here and would kill him if they could. So for him to get what he wants, which he feels is only fair, which is to leave this place he's been imprisoned, it has justified him to, kill anyone and everyone in his path. It does not make me feel any sympathy for him, to be clear. Mm-hmm. But I do think, as demented as he's become, and as just insane as he is, that it provides an explanation of how he got to this point where he's able to justify the kinds of things he's doing.
If anyone is crazy, it's this guy.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, it's a sort of a rational explanation, but is it really kill or be killed? Jacob is dead. Like, why do you have to? We don't know.
I mean, also at this point, he can't really be killed, so it's not like he has to worry about that. He does want to leave the island. Like, yeah, I get that, but
right. It was just 2 episodes ago that Saeed stuck a dagger in his chest, and he simply pulled it out. Like, it is not kill or be killed.
No, that's true.
It's vengeance and it's hatred and it's a twisted and demented view of the world, like you said.
Yeah, wasn't trying to explain away his behavior. I just like thinking about how he got to this horrible point.
It's not because his mother was crazy. It's not that.
No, it's not. Should we do the Emerson?
I think so. Yeah. This is the final piece of our conversation with Michael Emerson. His last appearance on the hatch. Wow.
He's such a sweet guy. I'm so glad that he came and talked to us again.
Me too. Let's play.
Do you ever wonder, I mean, the Hurley and Ben thing I find so lovely, with the scene in the afterlife, but did you ever find yourself wondering or thinking about what that might have been like for the rest of their lives together on the island, or their stories that you would have wanted to see or would be interested to tell there? Because there's a whole second arc to Ben's life that we never get to see.
And we shot that little extra.
Yes, you did.
Filming, which was kind of a tease about that world where Ben and Hurley are now kind of the managers. And I thought, oh, what's their intention? I guess it was just a little cherry on top or something. I thought, do they mean to stretch this out somehow? Do they mean to come back at a later date and move this whole show to another era on the island? Maybe it was just a thing that they were playing around with.
I mean, they called it The New Man in Charge. They put it on the season 6 DVD. And I mean, I remember being excited about that as a fan, but now I've got to put you on the spot. If you were offered the chance to reprise the role in some way, shape, or form to tell that story, would you want to, or have you moved on?
It would. I mean, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It would have to be. It would have to be a hell of a great idea and a hell of a twist. Something that really leaves our lost world behind and has a new dynamic, new relationship. I don't know. It would take some. I would have to read it so carefully to see what was up. I mean, I suppose it's like any other intellectual property. It's available for tweaking. I don't know. It's been a long time, and I don't think any of us have the same energy or the same hunger that we had, a dozen or more years ago.
Yeah. And presumably, if anything else happened, it wouldn't be Damon and Carlton, which I think would be a red flag for a lot of people.
Exactly. I mean, well, that's what I mean by, man, it would have to be a hell of a script by someone that could swim in those deep waters.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, the reason it's interesting to me is just that it is. I mean, you call it an intellectual property. It does seem like there is the groundings for a lost universe out there. I mean, there's so many more stories that could be told around the island and what happens before or after Oceanic 815. I mean, between all of the flashing through time and space, they laid the groundwork for many different stories that you could tell.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me. It's been 12 years and nobody has done that.
No.
Yeah.
No, there is. There's always such a seeming finalness about the end of Lost. It just, I think partly because it didn't go into any kind of regular kind of syndication, not the way I'm used to thinking of it. It hasn't been that easy to find all these years. And you would have thought a crowd favorite like Lost would have had this huge syndicated afterlife, And I know it's out there. I know it can be found, but it didn't have, how do I want to say? It didn't have like a high profile afterlife. I don't even know. Obviously now it's on a streamer somewhere, but for a long time it just seemed to drop.
There weren't like reruns,
right?
The way there would have been for
right,
like a sitcom, yeah.
Or like the show I did after it, Person of Interest. I mean, that's just out there. It's people can watch a zillion episodes over the holidays or something like that. Maybe I just haven't looked hard enough.
I would say Lost is still pretty popular. I mean, just doing a podcast about it, we see it. There's a large and vibrant fan base still, and
I know, and I know new people are coming to it.
Yeah, we get a surprising number of
got me and say my parents got me hooked on Lost, and so yeah, people are watching it. New people are discovering it now, even as we speak.
It's true. Okay, well, you heard it here, folks. If there's a really, really good script out there that someone's got, Michael Emerson would at least look at it. So that's something. No, I'm messing around. Um,
Oh gosh.
I think we just about got through our list here.
Yeah. I
and-
mean, we've talked, Michael, we've talked 3 times now. Thank you. Is there anything we've never asked you about loss that, or anything that really stands out to you as profound when you look back at it?
I mean, our conversations have been pretty thoroughgoing. You know, we've talked about the script and the action and the characters and all of that. I'm trying to think if I have any new. I look back on it now, and as it retreats into the mists of time, it has a little more fairy tale quality, and I begin to see that my life in Hawaii as an actor shooting it is somehow a version of being a castaway on a mysterious magic experience while I was there, but not realizing it so much at the time. Only now, in hindsight,
Yeah.
a dozen years later.
yeah.
But it was kind of great that way. I mean, why shouldn't that be the case? That one of the greatest jobs you ever had was also a great real life adventure in a way, and something exotic and unforgettable. Just the shooting of it was wondrous. We'd be out on these wild beaches in the middle of the night, or in the jungle with torches, and it was like when you were a kid and you were playing cowboys and Indians or something, and you just got deep into it, and it was always on a summer night late, and the cicadas were humming, and it just seemed like the time stood still and you lived in a make-believe world. And when we did that, when we were on Lost, it was great that way.
We already talked about the last scene where you're outside the church, but did you personally have any regret or any sadness that you didn't get to be inside with everyone? Did you at least get to be on the set that night?
No, I was grateful.
Yeah.
I felt that was right.
Yeah.
And a lot of characters came back from characters who had perished on the show before I even came on it. But so there was that quality of the reunion. And I thought, in a way, Ben Linus shouldn't be at the reunion. I mean, this actor comes in the middle of season 2 and he stirs everything up, and people got hurt and characters got killed and all of that. I thought, I think the good people should have a little party together, and the really bad people who sowed confusion should wait on a bench outside.
But you talked about how great the writers were. To me, that's one of the most impressive parts, is that they had a plan and they had their cast, and then you showed up, and they enjoyed so much seeing you on screen and realized the energy you brought to the show, and they didn't rip up their whole plan, but they rewrote it to center a lot of the story around your character, and they were able to do that, for you and for a couple of other folks, Ian Cusick and Jeremy Davies to an extent. When they when they got someone who really brought the screen to life like that, they adjusted and they made their plan work to tell a story that revolved around a character like Ben. So I mean, this is me talking personally. I would have loved to have seen you got to be part of the reunion. I think it would have been deserved, but it's impressive how they did that with your character when you arrived.
It was great the way, I think, when I was brought out there at the very beginning, that it was that what was more important than Ben or the actor playing him was that it had this idea. Let's try out this idea of let's put a face and a voice on what's really sinister on this island and see how it plays. And if it doesn't play well, this actor can go home. It would be very easy for this to be a thing that, a little trial, and then this didn't work out. But fortunately, it worked out, which is great. I've said this before. It's like a character actor's dream to make yourself essential.
Well, Sammy's making the face like he's all out of questions.
I'm tapped out.
Yeah, I mean, typically we ask if you're working on anything now that we should keep an eye out for.
You know, I'm on this show for Paramount Plus called Evil, and it's good. It's smart writing. It's the Kings, you know, Robert and Michelle King, who did Good Wife and Good Fight, and and I play a very bad person, if I'm even a person, a very evil character, but funny. And there's a lot of horror in the show, many demons and supernatural events. So it's a lot of fun that way.
That sounds familiar. Evil but funny. I mean, no. I have to say I've hesitated to watch Evil because I'm not typically into horror. But I'm finally almost done with The Good Fight after having spent the last 2 years watching Good Wife and Good Fight, and we've talked before, and obviously your wife Carrie is brilliant on those shows. But I'm also now convinced that Robert and Michelle King have got to be two of the most brilliant people in television. So maybe I'll give Evil a shot too.
Give it a shot. See what you think. It's really good, and there's thrills and chills in it. Yeah.
Well, Evil on Paramount Plus. We have been here with Michael Emerson. Michael, thank you again. We love talking with you, and I'm sorry that we won't have another opportunity to do this because we're done with Lost, but it's been great.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to talk with you too. And our paths will cross again, I expect.
Sure hope
Certainly
so.
hope so.
Good luck.
Good night. Thanks.
I know we say this every time we talk to him, but my God, is this guy elegant. The bit about as it retreats into the mists of time, Lost has a little more fairy tale quality to it. It's so true. That's what we're doing with this podcast.
Yeah. And isn't that true about, nostalgia in general, right? When we look back on something that we remember as good, it's like, oh, it was all so beautiful, and it probably wasn't, but it feels that way.
I have a confession to make. When Sawyer was, contradicts what I said earlier, which I thought was the right thing to say, but when Sawyer was walking through the bear cages and he finds the dress and he's kind of looking around sadly, I have to admit, even though that was kind of a ridiculous storyline that I criticized at the time, 3 years ago on this podcast, watching Lost, it made me kind of nostalgic to look back at how far we've come. I felt something, not gonna lie.
What a journey.
I will say, even though, so you said the Lost finale kind of has like a special kind of finality to it, and that maybe this helps explain why there hasn't been a reboot, there hasn't been a spin-off. I think that's true. I think that's fair. I think also as we discussed, the fact that Damon and Carlton wouldn't be involved, and maybe no one feels like they can quite live up to what those guys did, that maybe has something to do with it. All that said, I stand by my idea that there should be a Lost cinematic universe and that there should be more stories told within it.
Well, and I mean, there could be many a great spinoff, but we have discussed some great possibilities on this very show. The Charlotte spinoff, the Eloise Hawking spinoff, like all of these recurring but not quite main cast or only main cast for one season type characters who have fascinating lives and histories. And I would love to watch them for many years. But
And the island has seemingly always been there, and perhaps always will be there, working its unique magic and role in the world. There are just endless stories that could branch off from that, and still an opportunity for ABC/Disney to pursue those if they so choose, and fill their streaming subscriber targets on Disney Plus if they wanted to.
If you happen to be an executive at ABC or Disney, give us a call at 9546 Dharma.
Yeah, we can be the writers for your new show.
We have ideas.
We're very qualified for it at this point after having done basically a PhD in Lost over the last 6 years.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, we'll be back next week. We've got episode 9, Abaturno, coming up, and we have a very, very special conversation with Nestor Carbonell, Richard Alpert, digging deep into that episode.
That's going to be a 3-hour episode of this podcast. I have so much to say about Abaturno, and I'm so excited. Probably not literally, but If you would like to share your thoughts on Abiturno and not any of the other goofy things that we have mentioned during this episode, give us a call, leave us your hot take, country code 19546 Keep it to 60 seconds or less, ideally, if you can.
You can also find us on social media and share your thoughts. We're on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast, also facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts or any other app of any kind, leave us a rating and review. Tell us what you think of the show.
Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen, and our cover art is by Danny Roth.
And we will be back next week.
Namaste.